Good morning, friends. I hope everybody is doing wonderfully. Had a great Mother's Day and great time with your mother. If you were able to, I ended up with a migraine all day because of the wonderful weather that came through and spent the day in bed. I tried to go and have dinner with my sister and my mother, and that didn't happen. So I am happily feeling much better today. Glad the weather has at least changed. I wish it would warm back up, but it is what it is. So we are moving forward for the rest of this school year. We are not stopping this train. We are moving forward on Unit 8, and we're actually reordering these. This is not 8.4, this is 8.1, and we're working on multiplying and dividing rational expressions. Now, when I think about rational expressions, I'm really thinking about the rules for fractions. So, it's provided its numerator and denominator. Oh, wait, that sounds a lot like fraction words. Have no common factors other than a positive or negative one. So, what we're saying is, hey, we've got some fractions, and if I were to give you, say, 12x over 3x squared. The question would become, how am I going to simplify this? Now, the way I like to think about these may be very different than your previous teachers have explained them. And so I want to spend a few minutes explaining this because it will make a lot more sense when we look at this. I always break my numbers down into factors. Okay, so I know that 12 could either be 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Well, I have to say, hey self, look, there's a 3 right here, so I'm going to use 3 and 4 rather than 2 and 6. So this is equal to 3 times 4 times x. What I've done is break it down into its factors. The denominator is then 3, and how many x's am I going to have there? I'm going to have 2 of them. And again, I'm breaking this down into its factors. And then I do what I like to call cross-canceling. Some people call it simplifying, but we have both a 3 at the top and the bottom. They cancel each other out. We have an x at the top and the bottom, so they cancel each other out. So we have a single factor of 4 at the top, and we have a single factor of x at the bottom. So if I read this, a rational expression in its simplest form provides its numerator and denominator have no common factors other than a positive or negative one, which is where we are. So in this process, what we're going to do is first break each one of these down into their factors. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, remember the rules for factoring polynomials, that yellow sheet that I gave you, the flow chart. Please get that out and use that because that's going to be kind of important. If you can't remember how to factor these expressions, we're going to have some problems. So step 1 is to factor them. Step 2 is then going to be to cancel them. Cross cancel. And then you can leave them in their simplest forms here. You may need to remultiply. So if your answers have been simplified, have been multiplied, then you may need to remultiply. Now, if we're multiplying, this is easy. We can just do this straight across. If we're dividing, we need to remember our rules for dividing fractions. So if I had 3 halves divided by 6 not 8. Oh, it can be reduced, but oh well. 6/24. Okay. What am I going to do here? So many of you were told a long time ago in 5th grade, 6th grade, keep, change, flip. Okay. I like to say multiply by the reciprocal. Either way works. So the first number will stay the same. We are going to change our division to multiplication, and we are going to flip this over. We're going to turn it into the reciprocal, 24/6. And then we're going to cross cancel. We're going to write it in our factors and then cross cancel. So 24 can be rewritten as 6 times 4. And 4 can be rewritten as 2 times 2. Now you can cross cancel anything that is vertical, anything that crosses the line. So it can be vertical or diagonal. You cannot cross cancel anything that is horizontal. So what can I cross cancel? I have a 6 at the top and the bottom. They cancel each other out. I have a 2 at the top and the bottom. They cancel each other out. So I have 3 times 2, which equals 6. This should be very, very simple because you should have been doing this since 08, 7th grade, 6th grade. We are now going to apply this to expressions. So step 1 is going to be to factor them. So I'm going to think about factors of 12. I've got 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Now, because it is negative, one of these is going to be positive, one is going to be negative. Because my B factor is negative, the larger number is going to be negative, the smaller number is going to be positive. And I'm going to add these together. 1 plus 12, negative 12 is negative 11. 2 plus negative 6 is negative 4. This is the pair that I use. So this becomes x plus 2 and x minus 6. This one is pairs of perfect squares. So this is going to be x plus 2 and x minus 2. So remember, when it's perfect squares, you have 1 plus and 1 minus. Okay, then factor, then it says, oh wait, cancel. So I look at both the top and the bottom. Is there a factor both at the top and the bottom that can cancel each other out? Yeah. Multiply if you can, or I could simply just rewrite this. It is going to be x minus 6 over x minus 2. That's simplifying one. Okay, let's move on to multiplying. First it's going to be with monomials, then trinomials and binomials, then we're going to divide. Okay. So multiplying. Again, I like to break them out into its factors. So the first one is 5, x, x, and y. 2, x, y, and y. Then we have 6 can be broken down into 3 times 2. And then we have 3 x's And 10 can be broken down into 5 times 2. And we have a y. Okay, so step 1 is to factor. Step 2 is to cross cancel. So the first thing I see is that there's a 2 here at the top and the bottom. I'm going to cross cancel them out. I see that there's a 5 at the top and the bottom. They cancel each other out. I see there's a y here. They can cancel each other out. And an x. And that's where I have to stop, because there's nothing now on either side. I can't look looking diagonally, there's nothing where I have the same letter or number at both the top and the bottom. So now I simply multiply straight across. So what numbers do I have left at the top? All I have left is the number 3. So it becomes 3. What variable do I have across the top? I have the variable x. And how many x's do I have? I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have x to the 4th over, now what do I have across the bottom? I have the number 2. And what variable do I have? I have the variable y. And how many of them do I have? 2. Jackpot. Okay, now what about trinomials and binomials? Again, step 1 is to factor. So the first thing I can factor out of this first one is a 4x. So this becomes 4x times, now when I factor 4x out of 4x, I've got 1, because that's 4x times 1, 1 minus x. Okay, the bottom, I'm going to have 1 and 2, and they're both going to be negative. So this is going to be x minus 1 and x minus 2. Again, all I'm doing here is factoring. So go back to your notes on factoring if you're struggling with this. Sorry, needed a drink. All right. My Diet Dr. Pepper. Okay, negative 6. Remember, it is going to be 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. Those are my factors of 6. Because it's negative, one has to be positive, the other has to be negative. Because this is a positive, the bigger number is going to be positive, the smaller number is going to be negative. And I'm simply going to add. That means I'm going to use this pairing. So it is going to be x minus 2, x plus 3, and then we have 4x as our denominator. So step 1 is to factor everything out. Step 2 is to cross cancel. So there's a 4x at both the top and the bottom. They cancel each other out. There is an x minus 2 at the top and the bottom. They can cancel each other out. My question to you is 1 minus x the same thing as x minus 1? No, it's not. It's the same as negative 1 times x minus 1, but they are not the same things. If they were a plus sign, then it would be okay. We are going to leave them as they are. So, or actually, you know what? No, we're going to scratch that. It is the same thing as negative 1. How can I explain that to you? Okay, so if I do negative 1 times 1 minus x, I'm going to distribute. That gives me negative 1 plus x. Now, because of the distributive property, the commutative property, I can then rearrange this so this becomes x minus 1. So, if I were to multiply or factor out, so I can actually factor out, this becomes negative 1 times x minus 1. Basically, if the two numbers or the variable and the number are in opposite locations, you can do negative 1. Okay, so now can I cancel anything out? Yes, I can cancel this and I can cancel this. So what do I have left? I multiply straight across the top. I have negative 1 times x plus 3. And you can leave it just like this, or if your answer choices are not given that way, you could do negative x minus 3. Both of these answer choices are going to be acceptable. I want to look back at this expression. How do I know when I can use it times negative 1? So if it were 4 minus y and y minus 4, are these negative inverses of one another? Yes. I could multiply this times negative 1 and apply the same rules here and get this. But if this were plus y, are they negative inverses? No. That does not work if it's the powers are different. What about if it is if they're both plus? So if we have 3 plus x and x plus 3. Well, if we think about this, we can just simply apply the commutative property of addition. We don't have to multiply this times a negative 1. So we could, yes, those are equivalent. What about if one of them has a different negative power? So if we have negative 3 minus x, and then we have x minus 3. Are these going to be negative inverses of one another? No. If I were to multiply this times negative 1, a negative times a negative equals a positive 3. So we would have 3 plus x. It is not the same as minus. So, as a reminder, one of your quiz questions is going to be negative inverses. Basically going to have to identify what is the negative inverse so that you can be proficient in this skill. Okay. And then dividing rational expressions. So as I said before, fractions should be treated the same way. Keep, change, flip, or multiply by the reciprocal. So the steps are going to be the same. Step 1 is to factor. Step 2 is going to be cross cancel. The trick is you have to multiply by the reciprocal before you cross cancel. Let me say that again. You must. So step number 2 has to be to keep, change, flip before you cross cancel. I do not like spring allergies. Okay, so step 1 is to factor. We have 5 times x on the top. We do have a GCF here. It is 3, so 3 comes out, and we have x minus 4. Now, keep our dividing sign because we're going to slowly do this process. Factor the top. X comes out. We have a GCF, and we have x minus 2. And our factors for 8 are going to be 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. I'm going to use 2 and 4. They're both going to be negative. So we're going to have x minus 2 and x minus 4. Now, to make things a little simpler, I could cross cancel only if it's in the same term first, and it does. Now, again, keep. So I'm going to keep the first number the same. 5x over 3 times x minus 4. Change our division to multiplication, and then reciprocal or flip x minus 4 over x. Then I cross cancel. There's nothing at the top or the bottom. This way, diagonally, I have an x here and I have an x here. I have an x minus 4 here. I have an x minus 4 here. Our final answer is 5 over 3. Hard to believe that this expression would end up simplifying to 5/3, but it does. Okay, so again, step 1 is to factor. So 56 is 7 times 8. It's going to be negative, so it's going to be a negative 8 and a positive 7. So we have n plus 7, and we have n minus 8 at the top. We have n minus 5 at the bottom. There's nothing here in the numerator or the denominator that can cancel each other out. Divided by, again, all we're doing is factoring. Let's keep it simple. Factors for 48. So we have 1 and 48, 2 and 24, 3 and 16, 4 and 12, 6 and 8. Okay, we are adding them together. So it is going to be these two, and they're both going to be negative. So we have n minus 6 and n minus 8. And oh look, there is something that I can factor out before I do my division, because they're both on the same side as one another. That'll leave a 1 as a placeholder on the bottom, and that'll show up in a second as to why it's important. So now we're going to keep change our division to multiplication, and then flip. So we have 1 on the top, and we have n minus 8 on the bottom. And then it's going to be cross-canceling. So we get rid of our n minus 8s. And then we multiply across the top. I'm going to put it here to the left. We are left with n plus 7 over n minus 5. All right, so you have to be able to simplify rational expressions. You have to be able to multiply rational expressions. And you have to be able to divide rational expressions. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me, email me, send me a text message. I'm available until 2 p.m. and I hope you are all happy and healthy.